Anyone? No comments? Any objection to approving the proceedings as prepared? No objections, so the proceedings are approved. Next item is public comment. We have at least one individual who has offered or asked for time, John Whiteside. John, if you'd like to come up to the microphone there, please try to limit your comments to a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. John Whiteside of the Sustainable Fisheries Association. Actually, I'll respond as comments come forward and the discussion goes along. I just was putting my name down at that time. Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience who did not sign up? Yes, sir. Who'd like to come to the microphone, identify yourself, please.
Good afternoon, David Bush, North Carolina Fisheries Association. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak. If I understand correctly, there's been considerable time and effort already put into the spiny dogfish, trying to figure out what the assessment is, what the stock is, what our overfishing limit should be in that. But if I understand it correctly, you're considering reducing the spiny dogfish OFL by almost 50% based on 2 years of data. I understand there's also efforts to include an average between an additional 2 years that would give you a composite third year to include in this data. While we wait, I would ask your advisors on this species to consider the following. One of my colleagues at East Carolina University, Dr. Roger Olafson, along with a graduate student who's also a NOAA researcher, performed some very in-depth studies of spiny dogfish in our area, as well as some broader coastal studies in the species. Some of these include long-term tagging studies on mortality and population densities that were published in 2000 and 2009, respectively. What they're finding is that although the majority of the North Carolina tagged fish were recaptured within 18 months up and down the coast, substantial numbers of those individuals that were tagged 8 to 10 years ago are just now being recaptured, many of them in Cape Cod. That begs the question of how these fish are able to avoid recapture for so long if they're only migrating up and down the coast. Some of the research performed along with Steve Campana of Canada showed significant aggregation south of Cape Hatteras as well as offshore for extended periods of time. Based on this research, there's a strong probability of multiple stocks. Additionally, the researchers concurred that there's an approximate 15% overlap in these stocks, which leads to a further question whether assessors truly have a handle on the range of the stock and how many more undocumented aggregations there are that are not accounted for in the assessment. We ask that you consider North Carolina fishermen, given the current and future quota is heavily impacted before North Carolina fishermen even have an opportunity to fish in this historic fishery. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the audience who wants the opportunity to address the board? I see no hands up, so we'll go on with the proposed agenda. Next item of business is the dogfish stock assessment. Scott.
Thank you very much. I'm going to be giving the spiny dogfish assessment update for 2015. This was performed by Dr. Paul Ragu, and he wasn't able to make it here today, so I'm going to do this presentation for him. So this will be excerpts from the presentation he gave at the SSC meeting. The first thing is 2014 catch highlights. The total landings in 2014 were 10,715 metric tons. This increased from a drop in 2013, but this was very similar to the landings in 2012. The recreational and foreign fleet had very little significance on landings, and they only landed 64 metric tons. The landing estimates from Canada were not available. Total discards were on an increase from 12,820 metric tons in 2013 to 15,000 metric tons in 2014. This was a 19% increase. Total dead discard increased from 5,000 metric tons to 5,700 metric tons, which is a 15% increase. And the ratio of dead discard and landings increased to 0.54. This shows graphically the total landings for the East Coast. You can see the two major peaks. The first one in the 70s is the foreign fleet. The second one in the 1990s would have been the start of the industrial fishing. And then we see the decline and the subsequent increase in the last few years since 2002. And you see the drop in 2014, but we've rebounded from that. This is a table of the total discards and catch. With the total catch of note, in 2014, our total catch was 16,498 metric tons. And that's all sources combined. So 16,498. This is a graph of the trends in the ratio of total discard to landings and total dead discard to landings. Of note in this graph is that we were landing more of the spiny dogfish. Basically, more of the catch is being utilized. So this is kind of a good thing. The biological composition of the catch, as most of us know, the overall landings are dominated by female spiny dogs, and this pattern and sex ratio has been fairly consistent throughout the period, except for a small period in 1996 to 2000. As you can see graphically, you can see the large increase from 1995 to 2000 of males, but for the most part, they don't really amount to much in the fishery. It's female dominated. This is the survey summary, and basically I'm going to go over points that had an effect on the assessment. These are the notable points. So the first one is that there was no estimate for 2014 due to the incomplete survey. The assessment is based on a 3-year average, and 2014 was not available. This shows the spatial distribution of spiny dogfish from the survey for 2015. The yellow dots represent the catch, and the red dots represent the 6 highest values. And of note in this is that though the catch is distributed equally, for the most part, up and down the coast, most of the higher top 6 values occur in the southern region. And that'll be of note in a minute. This next map is the 2014 spatial distribution from the survey. And what we see is the survey was incomplete. It didn't capture any of the southern region. And as it turns out, the southern region has a dramatic effect on the composition of the catch. So that brings the question that everyone asks is, why didn't Paul just impute 2014? Instead of, he basically just used the average of 2013 and 2015. And he did come up with an alternate method to impute that value. And it was basically, the imputed value was the mean of all the regions divided by the mean of the reduced regions times the mean of 2014. And this basically gave an imputed value. And then he would take that imputed value and times it by the area of the survey by the trawl footprint, and that would give him a swept area biomass for 2014. But he had a lot of reservations with that because that fraction of the population from the northern region was extremely variable. As it turned out, the southern region was really important in terms of the overall biomass calculation. So we see that in this graph. This is the ratio of total area to sub-area. So if we wanted to impute the 2014 value for males, that would be within reason. The ratio is very responsible. It's very reasonable. The ratio of females, though, is extremely variable over the years. And that's what didn't give him a lot of reliability in an imputed value for 2014. The second point of note, that the raw year 2-year average for 2013 and 2015 of the female spawning stock biomass was 135,000 metric tons for 2015. This was a sharp drop from the 3-year average that we found in 2013. So we dropped from 235,000 metric tons to 135,000 metric tons. The one thing of note is the 2012 biomass was not only the largest biomass we had seen on record from this survey, but it was also the most variable. And the TC noted in 2012 that they were concerned about the extremely high 2012 estimate, and they felt it might have been more indicative of availability versus abundance. This next table shows the raw values for the biomass estimates. As you can see, 2011 was above average, 2012 was very above average, and 2013 was average. So the average of those would be very high. The 2013 was an average year, and 2015 was below average, which all came together for a sharp decrease. This is a comparison of the variance of the mean per tow versus the mean number of tow. And what can be imputed from this graph is that 2012's variability. It was extremely high. The next survey point that I wanted to talk about was the pup production in 2015. It was 2.4, which was below the long-term average of 2.59. As most of us remember, there was a huge gap in pup production from 1998 to 2004. And it was only a matter of time that that effect of that low pup production was come into effect. And I believe we're starting to see that now. The last point was a 2-year average for 2013 and 2015 suggests a large number of recruiting females in the 40 to 60 centimeter range. This pattern is very consistent with what we've seen high recruitment since 2009. And this shows that graphically. The recruitment starts becoming strong in 2008 and really becomes stronger in 2009. So this is the assessment summary. What they found is stock is rebuilt. Overfishing is not occurring. The F in 2014 was 0.214. Our F at MSY is 0.2439, so we are not overfishing. The stock is not being overfished. Our biomass in 2015 was 138,000. Our biomass MSY is 159,000 metric tons. So we're above threshold, but we're still below target by 87%. The short-term decline in abundance was expected, but recruitment of subadults to explore a biomass should increase the stock, and there is very low risk of falling below 1/2 BMSY. The median OFL for 2016 was calculated at 24,247 metric tons. The P-star based estimate for ABC for 2016 is 16,765 metric tons. This shows graphically the SSB. And of note is the 2015, there's no 2014 estimate, and 2015 estimate is below the target, but still above the threshold. Paul did a projection based on F equal F MSY as the proxy. He assumed the 2015 catch at 16,542, which is the same, he assumed the same catch as 2014. He projected it out for 250 years to check for stability at FMSY. And the model shows decreases in stock size as was expected in the next few years. But the current run suggests the stock has low probability of declining below the threshold biomass. And of note is the recruitment of strong year classes from 2008 to 2013 should show increased stocks beginning around 2019. This shows graphically the projections. You can see the drop and then the increase in 2019. And that was my presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Scott. I'd like everyone to ask your indulgence to kind of deviate very slightly from the agenda. What I would like, because it's going to have a direct bearing on the questions you're going to ask, and we can essentially update the information you have so that the question focus more on the specifics. So what I would like to do is hold your questions to Scott. We'll do the Mid-Atlantic review. I'm going to ask, following that, I'm going to ask Rick Robbins to come and brief us. Rick, do you want to do that now, or if you'd like to do that now, just brief us on what the Mid-Atlantic Council intends to do in terms of reviewing this issue of the 2-year average. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity. I'm Rick Robbins, Chair of the Mid-Atlantic Council, and I'll be brief, but the Mid-Atlantic Council did meet at our October meeting and establish specifications for spiny dogfish. Those are based directly on the assessment update results, but perhaps most significantly, we recognize there was a problem with that missing year of data, so the Council passed a motion that would engage the SSC and the Northeast Fisheries Science Center, and they've already had that engagement. Dr. Rago has been in communication with a working group of the SSC, and they scheduled a webinar for November 24th. And they're going to be looking at several things. They'll look at the analysis they've already done, but they'll also consider the algorithm that was proposed by Dr. Pierce in our council meeting. And so that would be one way to fill in the data for 2014. They're also going to analyze a Kalman filter and apply that to the data. That would be a smoothing function that would also provide an alternative data point for 2014. And pending the result of that work, the SSC will review it on November 24th, and we will reconsider the question if that value is different at our December council meeting. And that'll be the week after the New England Council meet. So when both councils meet in December, they're going to have an updated value in front of them pending the result of that analysis. And I don't know what those figures will be yet. The work hasn't been done, but we do expect to have it very soon. And so I think that'll put, we're cautiously optimistic that'll put us in a better position in December when we reevaluate the question. But I just wanted to provide a quick update in terms of where we are on that.
Thank you very much, Rick. Any questions for Rick while he's at the microphone? No hands up. Okay, so Ashton, would you just summarize the Mid-Atlantic Council activities, and then we'll go back to Scott for questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm going to move forward, and this presentation is kind of a modified version of the one that was presented at the Mid-Atlantic Council by Jason Didden. Thank you. All right, next slide. Okay, so for recent landings, this fishery is a May 1 through April 30th fishing year. This graph just shows landings to date. So you will see in the yellow line is last year's fishing year, and the blue dots are this year's fishing year. You can see we're trending slightly below where we were last year. As of October 21st, we had harvested 8.7 million pounds, which represents 17% of the overall quota of 50 million pounds. Next slide. For management measures, just to show in previous fishing years, so in 2012, the fishery caught the quota, which was 20 million pounds. In the 2013 fishing year, they caught 27 million pounds. You can see the quota is starting to increase. In the 2014 fishing year, 16 million, 22 million last year, and as I just said, we're trending slightly below where we were last year. Next slide. So the fishery performance report comes from a call that Jason convened with myself with the AP, just to kind of get their input before everything was presented to the MID. So in general, the fisheries participants reported that they do not have any problems catching their trip limits. The main thing that they said is that there's limited markets to sell to. It affects the price and how much processors are willing to take in. So the processors will place restrictions on when they will accept the product. There was a lot of input on a slow and steady approach was needed for trip limits. There was some people who felt that maybe they should be increased. This was done by region and gear types mainly, had differing opinions. But overall, the the majority felt that a slow and steady approach was needed given the market, and that processors will not accept higher volumes at this time, and they didn't want any downward shifts in price if trip limits were increased. So that's a very quick overview of the fisheries performance report.
All right, thank you. Ashton, questions for Ashton? No? No question? No. Bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in other words, the catch so far is only 17% of the quota, which is 50 million pounds. Is that what you just said?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions for Ashton? Okay, Ashton, you're going to finish your presentation on the specifications. Is that correct?
Just moving right into specifications. Okay, so the SSC and subsequently the MID recommended a 36.9 million pound ABC for spiny dogfish. As you can see here, the next point, kind of Rick just touched on that, is that there is discussions based on the motion that was passed at the MID to kind of modify these numbers. However, I'm just going to go ahead and present the numbers that were recommended at the Mid-Atlantic Council so you guys can see them. They may change in early December. Next slide. Okay. Let's just go to the next slide where we just kind of show the ABC. Next slide. Okay, so you can see that the ABC is 36.9 million in the 2016 fishing year, which is about a 41% decrease from what we have now, which is about 50 million pounds in the 2015 fishing year. Next slide. So when we deduct out the Canadian landings of 143,000, then we deduct the U.S. discards of 11 million are deducted. The U.S. recreational landings of 68,000 are deducted. And then finally, we get to the commercial quota for the 2016 fishing year that's proposed is 25 million pounds. As you can see, this is about a 50% reduction from the commercial quota, which is 50 million pounds in the 2015 fishing year. The recommended quota for 2016 would still be 11% above the landings in the most recent fishing year. And the risk of overfishing in these years from the Council's risk policy would be a 33% risk of overfishing in 2016, 30% in 2017, 28% in 2018. Just as a reminder for ASMFC, for trip limits, in 2014, the trip limits were set at 5,000 pounds per trip for northern states, Maine through Connecticut. Southern states can set their own possession limits. That concludes the presentation.
Thank you, Ashton. Any questions? Rob.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not a question, but a comment. I'm not sure it was made clear that when the council asked through a motion to have the SSC and the center revisit this situation of the 2012 data that Chairman Robbins from the council mentioned to you, the specification was only 1 year, so 2016 was the only year that was, motioned at the council, pending whatever happens later on.
All right, thank you very much, Rob. Any other points? David.
I'd like to thank Rick Robbins, Chairman Robbins, for coming to our meeting today and providing us with a summary as to where they are right now. In other words, it's not over yet. The council decision made not too long ago cut the commercial quota in half from 50 million pounds to about 25 million pounds based on a 2-year moving average instead of 3, because the 1 year was missing due to a breakdown of the Bigelow. It had a mechanical problem, and as admitted by the chairman of the SSC, they couldn't get into areas to survey where high dogfish abundance was expected, and that was a critical strata that was missed. So the debate, the discussion that we had at the Mid-Atlantic Council, with me being there as vice chair of the board, it's a joint council plan, the spirited debate resulted in a decision to have some further discussion about what indeed should the ABC, the commercial quota, be for the upcoming fishing year. And one reason for that decision was a motion that I made regarding how to find a third data point. How to find a third data point that would provide us with a far better perspective of the amount of dogfish that is out there on the fishing grounds now. And I think most of us involved in the dogfish fishery are well aware that dogfish are extremely abundant. So apparently, council staff, under the direction of Chairman Robbins, and working with the Northeast Fisheries Science Center, Paul Rago specifically, they have maybe three ways in which this can be revisited. And Scott noted some of those. One will be the approach that I suggested. If my approach actually has legs, and I really think it does have legs because it's a common sense approach, frankly, I won't get into the details except to say, using my approach, the spawning stock biomass, the large females, instead of it being about 136,000 metric tons, it's 184,000 metric tons. And that'll lead to a commercial quota much higher than 25 million pounds. Where exactly, I'm not sure. Anyways, that's all subject to further analysis, further discussion. So I'm suggesting to you, Mr. Chairman, and to this board that we really don't have to take final action on the specification for 2016. It really makes sense for us to wait until we get the results of the discussions, the work being done with staff with the Northeast Fisheries Science Center. I'm optimistic that when they're through with their work, we're going to find out that indeed the Mid-Atlantic Council will be revisiting the 25 million pounds. It'll go up to some other number. I'm optimistic it will. How high will it go? I don't know yet. I wait for those analyses to be presented. I don't want to, as a board member, make a motion for any particular quota for next year, because in all likelihood we'll have to revisit it once we get that information, that work from the Mid-Atlantic Council. So that's my suggestion, Mr. Chairman, that there's no need for us to take final action on the 2016 spiny dogfish specifications, 17 or 18 for that matter. Certainly not on 16. That we can wait until our winter meeting when we have all that information in hand.
All right. Thank you, David. I'd ask you, the members of the committee, to keep that in mind. As I said I was going to do, I'm going to offer anyone an opportunity to ask Scott questions on the assessment, and then we're going to come right back to David Pierce's suggestion. So anyone have questions on the assessment? No hands up? Okay. Then David has suggested a course of action, which would be, Terry.
I'm just ready when you're ready, Mr. Chairman, to move it to the next step.
All right. You'd like to make a motion?
Yes, sir. Dr. Pierce provided all the rationale, so I'm going to move to postpone final action on the 2016 to 2018 spiny dogfish specifications until the winter meeting.
Is there a second? I have numerous. Dr. Pierce, second. Discussion on the motion. Any discussion? Any objections to the motion? Seeing no objections, the motion stands approved. Is there any other business to come before the board? If not, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Just as a reminder for commissioners and their spouses, there is the reception with the Gulf states in the pool area, which I believe is behind the bar area, at 6 p.m.